In this lesson, we'll create a large screen TV in the front wall. So let's actually embed kind of a large TV monitor here in the front wall of this room. And to do this, we need to add some resolution. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the walls, go to an edge selection, and I'm going to just drag across all of these edges. Okay, just drag a vertical bar across those. And now I want to go to Edit Edges and choose Connect. I'll go ahead and bring up the Connect Edges settings, and we can choose the number of segments. I'm going to go ahead and choose 2 segments. Okay, and I can slide those around. So just kind of slide those to where you want the kind of the edges of the TV monitor to be. So maybe kind of in the middle, and then we can pitch those and make them as large or small. And this doesn't not going to be really the right edge of the TV, but it's going to be a little bit larger than that. So just keep that in mind. So I'll slide this around and maybe open it up a little bit. Say OK to that. And now we need geometry along the top and bottom as well. Now, because these walls are going to stay completely straight, they're not going to deform at all, I don't have to worry too much about adding resolution across different, like for instance, if I wanted to add the top of this TV, I don't necessarily need to add it all the way around to create nice, nice quad geometry. I can go ahead and in here and just in a polygon selection, select this particular polygon, and we can use this to actually create the TV. So we'll just do it under Edit Polygons, we'll do an inset. Okay, and we'll change the inset amount. Okay, just up that amount, and it's not really important what it is, just so you can see that. Say OK. And now what we can do is just go to Scale, just using R, and now we can scale this polygon to the shape of our television set and the position. So we can just move this around and just keep it along that Z-axis so that it's right along that flat base. And because this is all flat, that's going to be just fine. So we'll just kind of move this, keeping in mind that we're going to be adding some sort of architectural type of detail here. So we might want to scale this down a little bit, but we will be able to modify this very easily once we get this in here. Okay, so just get it kind of generally where you want it. And now we're actually going to inset this in. So rather than creating geometry that's going to hang on the wall, this is actually going to be inset into the wall itself. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to go ahead and inset this again. Okay, and we'll just do kind of a small amount here. So maybe something like that. Okay, and let's go ahead and now do a bevel. So the bevel is going to have an inset and also kind of an extrude included. So what I'm going to do is just kind of give it a small outline amount. Okay, and you can see how that's kind of going in there. Then I can change the height of that. I can change the outline amount as well. Okay, now I'm starting to push that back inside there. I'll say OK to that. Now if I just want to go straight back, I can just do an extrude. Okay, and go by group or local normal, either one should be fine. And then that will push that. You can see it kind of goes straight back, and there it's going back negative amount, and there's about a little over 1 inch. It's going back. Say OK to that. Now if we want to actually separate this TV, right now it's just part of a single part of the wall. If we wanted to separate this, we could actually come in and detach it. And so we'd go into Edit Geometry down here and detach that if we wanted to do it. I am going to go ahead and actually leave it part of the wall for now. Okay, if we turn off, you can see how that's now inset. You can add any sort of detail if you wanted to add a little bit more detail in here. You could go into the edge selection, and let's say you want to add a little bit more detail in here. We could select this loop. So it selects that entire loop, and if you wanted to chamfer that, you could do that. Add a segment in there if you wanted to add a little bit more detail, or add a little bit of a bevel there if you wanted to knock off one of those corners to get it looking the way you want. But now we've got that TV set in there, and like I said, you could separate that out if you wanted to give it a different look. Or if you wanted to be able to have access to the screen so you can do your texturing on that, you could detach that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it for now in case I want to move this TV around, because there's a large architectural element that we're going to be adding here. Okay, and we're going to actually start to do that in the next lesson, and it's going to be kind of an S shape that comes from here, kind of curves around. It's kind of a big shelf that kind of curves around and back under and then out. Be kind of almost the focal point of the room, I'd say. And instead of creating geometry, we'll go to shapes, and we're going to create splines. And let's start with just a rectangle. Okay, I'm going to go into the top view, the front view. And so this is the edge of our wall here. Okay, and then this is the other edge. So just keep this in mind. And there's our television, which we can move around however we want. This is going to be the top of the wall. Okay, so this is the vaulted ceiling. So this is the area that we're going to be concerned about right in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a rectangle here, and I'll just kind of drag this out, and I'm going to drag this kind of to this point right in here. Okay, so maybe something like that. All right, and now let's go into the modify panel and change some of these settings. Okay, so on the parameters, I can change the length and width. Okay, so I want it to be close to something like that. I also want to change the corner radius, give it a little bit of a radius there. So just something, not anything necessarily too soft, but I've got a corner radius about 4 or 5 inches. Maybe about 4 inches will do. And what we want to do is we want to have this come across, come around this way, and then turn and come down in this direction. Okay, so let's go ahead and duplicate this just by holding down Shift and pulling this down. We can create a clone. So we'll copy that. Okay, and now we can go ahead and bring the top part of the spline flush with the bottom part of the spline up here. So we'll go ahead and change our parameters. So let's go ahead and leave the width. Let's change the length so that the bottom of this is above the floor. Okay, so just something like that. Make sure that this is nice and flush there. And so once you've got this, what we want to do is get rid of certain portions of these splines. Okay, so to do this, we're going to have to convert these to editable splines. So on both of these, I'm going to convert to editable spline and convert to editable spline. Okay, and now for this one, I want to go ahead and get rid of this segment right over here. So we'll go to the sub object, go to segment, and we can get rid of this segment, and also this one, and this one. All right, now on this bottom part, we can get rid of some of these segments. We can get rid of these over here. Okay, get rid of that one, and this one. Let's also get rid of this guy. Okay, so what we're left with is basically this spline and this spline. Okay, so let's go ahead and attach these together to make one spline. Right, so what we need to do is go up to geometry, our geometry rollout, say attach, and we'll simply attach the other spline. And you can do this with either one selected. Okay, go ahead and turn that off. And now we need to combine these together. So we've got these vertices that are right here. We've got 2 vertices. So I'm going to select both of those vertices, come down to weld, and we'll just weld those together into one vertex. So now we're dealing with one spline. If we select the spline subobject, you can see that that's a single spline. Let's go ahead and go to vertex subobject, select this vertex, and we can bring that all the way into this wall, penetrate that into the wall. Okay, and we can modify this if we want to. If we want to bring this whole thing down, we can select all these and maybe bring this down just a little bit, but we want it to be right up close to the ceiling. Okay, go ahead and maybe bring this up a little bit as well, and this will be kind of right near the floor. Okay, so now we've got this built. Let's go ahead and kind of move it back towards the wall here. And so now what we want to do is create part of a spline that actually comes out forward from this point. And so to do this, we're going to go to vertex, select this vertex here. This is basically the one we're going to bring this out from. And what we want to do is insert, but we want to insert this and not have any sort of a curve. We want it to be kind of nice and straight. So to help us with that, we're going to convert this point. So at any point on these splines, you can right click on a vertex and we can choose what kind of vertex this is. Right now it's a Bezier corner, so it's a sharp corner, but it's got Bezier handles. And what we want to do is turn it into just a corner. Okay, and that'll just make it a linear, basically what you can think of as a linear vertex, so that any points off of here will be kind of a nice sharp angle. So now what we want to do is come in and insert a new point, and we'll just go in and pull this out. Undo that, click on here and pull that out. If you drag, it's going to make that a nice soft point once again, which is not what we want. So at this point I can grab this new vertex, and we want to line it up a little bit better with what we've got here. So we can go ahead and in the top view kind of pull it out straight a little bit more. Okay, you can right click on that and just make sure it's have a nice sharp point. Then we'll just pull that up from the front view. Okay, and maybe pull that over a little bit. Okay, and you're just getting it kind of nicely lined up there, which is what we've got there. And I can pull it out a bit more if I want to make that a bit longer. Okay, so you can think of this as sort of a framework of this piece that we're going to be building. Okay, right now there's no geometry along this, but we'll get to the point where we can add that geometry. So we've got a single spline that's connected, that's kind of a more complex shape, and you can see how we were able to just quickly attach those things together, weld some vertices together, and real quickly get a nice spline shape that we're now able to use to create some geometry. It's going to go, but now we need some geometry to flow along here. So let's go ahead and create that. We'll just create a shape here in the front view. Go to create and shape, spline. Let's just create a rectangle. And I'll draw it out something along these lines. And then let's give it a corner radius, and think of this as sort of the edges of our shelf. So we can make these as soft or as sharp as we want. Let's give them a little bit of softness there. And now there are several ways that we can create geometry along splines and curves. We looked at one of those ways with the splines that we're using for the trim. We can also use a loft, or we can use something called a sweep. So let's go ahead and select our editable spline here, and let's add a modifier. So we'll go into the modifier list, and let's add a sweep. And right away you can see that there's been some geometry added, and this has been added because we're using the built-in section right here. And you can select all the different types of sections that come in with this sweep, which is kind of neat. You can really quickly create some neat effects here. You got a pipe, you got some sort of construction, you got like an I-beam there. So you can do a lot of different things here, but what we want to do is actually use our own section. So we want to click the little Use Custom Section radio button there. And then from here we need to pick the shape that we want to use for our section. So we'll go ahead and say pick, and we'll select our rectangle. And you can see that that immediately brings that in. Now I want to go ahead and now kind of thin this up a little bit so we can grab this rectangle, and if we play with the parameters, let's look and see what happens over here. So if I play with the length, you can see that that gets wider. So we'll go ahead and make that a little bit wider. And if I play with the width, you can see that actually makes that just a little bit thinner. Then you get something like that. Okay. If we go back here, we can turn the sweep on and off. And because this is added as a modifier, we can still modify this editable spline underneath. So if we go ahead and choose the spline, you can see that we can't see the sweep any longer, and that's because we don't have our Show End Result button on. If I turn that on, I can now come in and edit this and still be able to look at the geometry. So let's say that I want to now drag this over to be flush with this wall. Well, I can drag across here, and what this is selecting is actually the points of our spline, not any of the geometry that we have. Okay, so with those points selected, I'll simply now pull those over and make those flush with the wall. And I can bring this over, just select these, kind of make that flush with the wall. Okay, if I want to bring this up and make it kind of flush with the ceiling, I can go ahead and grab these vertices up here, okay, and move those up as well. Okay, so I can grab those and kind of move those up to the ceiling. Okay, so I can modify this spline and all the geometry follows along with it. Okay, if I don't want this to come out quite so far, again, you can go ahead and select the vertices and just move that in. Okay, then I can go back and let's say I want to make this a little bit thicker. go back to my rectangle here, and it'll just change the length. Okay, and let's say I want to make it roughly this this length here, this width. So I can go ahead and make it that size, and then I'm going to move this out. So I can kind of combine a lot of these different things to create the effect that I want, and that is this kind of a look here. Okay, so I've got a spline, I've got geometry added along the spline using the sweep. The sweep is using this profile over here, which we can still modify. So you get a lot of interactivity working this way. You don't have to go in and select points. You can always turn this off and add a different modifier if you want to, and you're left with your spline. So that's really kind of a flexible way of working. All right. Now, if we want to now move the TV up, so let's say that it's not really in position now, we can go ahead and just grab those vertices. Okay. And I want to go to a view reference coordinate system there, and just pull that up so that it is kind of right in the middle there. Okay, and if you wanted to, you could kind of scale that a bit and just get it where you want it. All right, so now that we've got this built, we now need to let's add some kind of lighting up inside here, some recessed lighting. And we can do that using the Boolean that we have. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the cylinders for the holes that we're going to create. So we'll come up here, and I'm just going to go to create, and let's create a piece of geometry, standard primitive, and let's create a cylinder. And we'll just drag it out to the kind of the size of the light that we want. Kind of drag up a height. The height doesn't matter too much, so we'll go back and change this here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up until it's intersecting the top part of our little new piece of geometry here. All right, and then we'll go back to the top view, and so figure out where you want those lights. So maybe we want them offset a little bit towards the front, and figure out how many you want. Let's say we want a few more here, so I'm going to go ahead and shift drag this out, and I'll drag that out, and I'll say we want maybe 3 copies, and that'll pull those out. You can see there. And let's say we want those just on this part, and then we'll have kind of a lamp over here. Okay, so we're going to be cutting all of these out. Now, let's say we don't want to cut these all out separately. Okay, let's say that we want to do this all in one shot. I'm going to just move these over a little bit. So what we need to do with this is actually combine these into a single piece here. So to do that, we need to convert one of them into an editable poly. Convert that one, and then under Edit Geometry Rollout, there's an option for Attach. So we'll say Attach, and then we'll simply go through and click all of these different pieces. And so think of these as kind of the drill pieces, or the pieces that we're just cutting out of this. All right, so now that we want to create kind of a Boolean for this, let's go ahead and convert this down into an editable poly. Once we've got all of our things set up, let's actually move this out just a little bit. Now that I see that, go ahead and move this in just a little bit so that's nice and flush there. And let's pull this out slightly. Okay, so once we've got that in the way that we want to, we can now go up here and collapse, say yes, and this is going to make it into an editable mesh. And what I usually like to do is go ahead and convert that over into an editable poly. It gives you a few more options with which to work there. So now that we have that, we want to actually Boolean out these holes. So again, much like we did with the door, we'll go to Create, and let's go to Compound Objects, Boolean, and the rectangle, or our front piece, is our operand A, and we want to subtract from it operand B. So go ahead and pick operand B, and we're going to pick these little drill pieces here. Go ahead and pick those, and now you can see that those holes have been cut out. Okay. Now to get this back to an editable state, we can go and convert this to an editable poly. And now we have holes in there that we're able to add our recessed lighting. All right, so let's go ahead and in the next lesson, finish up with our shelf up here by just adding some recessed lights inside here. And then we'll continue on and start working on things like the window coverings and the couch, and just start to build up our room that we've got here. So we'll go ahead and do that starting in the next lesson.